So sometimes things happen that we're just not in control of. And unfortunately, that's what happened with this video because I was not able to control all of the lighting aspects. So please watch and just give me a little bit of slack because I wasn't able to control the camera settings once we got the podcast going, and then it ended up getting dark on us. So just keep that in mind while you're watching, and I hope you enjoy and really get something out of this. Hey guys, this is Brent Woods with the Finding Freedom podcast, and today I'm hosting meteorologist Ben Terry.
That's right. It's great to be on the Finding Freedom podcast, and you know what? If you don't like it, you can just change the channel.
All right, so I got to be honest, man. I'm a little nervous, and the pressure is on. Because I mean, you're kind of like a local celebrity now, you know.
Well,
I mean, I think the whole thing after Change the Channel then really it blew up, you know. And then,
and I don't know why. You know, it was so strange to me that it took off. You know, like it did, because I happened to be. The way that started is actually a comment that someone had left on my page. I guess it was the day before it was making landfall. I didn't even see the comment until about 2 weeks after. I was at my friend's house. We had evacuated to Baton Rouge, and I was just going through the comment section on Facebook because I don't read everything every day because I just can't keep up with all that, nor do I really care, to check it every single hour. But
right, yeah. I
saw that comment, and I was thinking, like, what could I put here now after the fact, because I was like, I got to say something here because this is too easy, and I just had no idea it was going to take off like that. I think it must have been something that it just kind of struck a chord with people. When they saw it, I guess they were all thinking the same thing, and I guess I just said what everybody else was thinking. I don't know, but
it was great. The responses, I looked at all the responses, and I laughed and laughed and laughed.
I say whatever gives people something to laugh about because we kind of needed that, in this terrible time. We needed something to laugh about. Otherwise, it was, I kind of said you either laugh at it or to cry about it. When you come back and see the damage, you kind of have to find some humor in all of it.
Yeah, man. It I think both.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to a lot of different people as far as my clients and
Mm-hmm.
even outside of that, and it's just been completely devastating for them.
Right. I think we've all cried at some point. When
Yeah.
the first time you saw what happened, it was. And even today, it was still hard to just grasp, what's happened to our area. It's changed forever,
Yeah, it's been tough. And you weren't here for Rita, right?
No, I wasn't.
Man, I was a lot younger, but it was a rough time.
Yeah. This was worse, though.
It was
definitely.
worse. And I think, the ability with Facebook now to see all the devastation, back then, you just saw it was on the news. And so
you kind of had a limited view of what was going on.
Right.
Yeah.
It was still rough, but then now you just see everybody's posts, and it's just...
You see every single house and street. And
your struggles with insurance. Yeah. If I had a nickel for every time a client was talking about insurance and the frustration with that, it'd be a big thing.
And that's what's heartbreaking, really, is seeing the things that people are having to deal with now after the storm. We've already had to deal with so much, and then you have to fight just to feel like you're getting, like what you deserve to, or can even afford to start the recovery. A lot of people are still waiting on money just to fix their house, and that's what's tough, seeing that we put up this fight with the storm, and now you have to put up a fight with your insurance company on top of that. So
it's been crazy. If it's not one thing, it's another.
Right.
Like for us, it's been okay with the insurance side, but to find a contractor that can actually come out and work on it, it's been a challenge.
To find anybody, a roofer, just somebody to come. The place I'm living at now, we still have broken out windows because you just can't get anybody to come over and fix it. Everybody's so busy, so it's just, that's why I said it's going to take forever. It's going to take a long time for this place to get back to normal as we knew it before. But it's just the storm changed the landscape of our area. So that's what's going to be the toughest. Is I was talking about that to a friend of mine yesterday. I said I was going back through Google Maps and like riding through Lake Charles and seeing how nice everything looked. At some point, they're probably going to update those maps, and so you're going to lose all the trees and things that you're used to seeing.
Yep.
And that's what's sad, is just not having those landmarks and things that, that defines Southwest, like the KPLC Tower. That was to me, that was a landmark of the downtown skyline.
Well, right,
and it's
because
gone.
when you cross over the
yeah,
bridge, you saw that right next to the
yeah,
Capital One
lit
Tower.
up at night, and now it's driving into work now. It's a lot different looking downtown. You don't see those things that you're used to seeing in the sky, and that's the tough part about it, is just for people who have lived here and call this their home for decades. It's a lot tougher, I think, for us to have to, to move on after this. But so many people are. That's what's been great, is seeing that. I was afraid after this happened that so many people were just going to up and leave, and not want to come back or live here, because it is depressing day after day after day to see the same debris and damage. And I just went to Baton Rouge for a couple of days this past weekend, just because I had a doctor's appointment. I just wanted to kind of get out of the city. I just wanted to go somewhere that was normal for a couple of days and eat at a restaurant that was not packed with people. That that's one thing I've noticed here, is that so many places are not open yet. I mean, this is almost a story in itself, is just surviving in this area, even though the outside doesn't realize what we're still going through. They think that we're just getting back to normal now that the national media's left and the attention's taken off with all these other storms, like with Zeta and things like that. It's kind of taking the focus away from our area, but just the day-to-day struggles of trying to get simple things done, whether it be shopping for something, or just trying to go find a restaurant that's open. And then if you do, finding a way to even get a table. Everything is just so different now. Just trying to find a dry cleaners, or trying to find is your doctor even taking patients right now. That's been a struggle. So
absolutely. I know we're about to have a baby next month, and it's hard to even figure out what's going to happen with all of that.
Yeah.
So it's
stuff that you take for granted, until something like this happens. But then even now, we're weeks and weeks after the hurricanes, and people still don't even know like what's open, what's available. When are things going to get kind of back to normal again? So that can be tough, especially like in your instance, having a baby on the way. I'm sure that's been extra stressful.
Oh, it's been it's been extremely stressful for sure.
Yeah, all those little things you don't think about,
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I was driving to your house where we are right now, and looking over, the sun was kind of hitting the Capital One Tower just at the right angle, and you just saw the wood in there and the glass mixed in, and it's just it's been what, 2.5 months, I think, right?
Yeah.
And it's just completely devastating. It just really hit me. I'm like, man, what? Wow, wow.
It was good to see that wood go up, because that meant they're going to repair things.
Right.
Something's going to get better. It's just going to take a long, long time before we start seeing, normalcy again. And that's what's going to be tough. We're going into the holidays now. And, that's even tougher now, especially I think with what we're having to deal with insurance, and people's homes are not going to be livable for the holidays. That's going to be really, really tough going into Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I tell you what, it's going to be, we were kind of joking about Halloween, because it was easy to decorate for Halloween.
I saw some really creative stuff, man.
Right.
It was great.
I've seen these, the wind turbines, that people are using those for, little decorations and centerpieces and things. But, at some point it's going to be, tough to think about, this is not going away next week or the week after next. We're still going to be dealing with this, in 2021. On top of that, we still have the coronavirus pandemic going on, and we're kind of concerned about that as well, taking another surge as we get into the winter. And that's one thing that's been kind of disturbing to me, is it seems like we've certainly put it on the back burner in Southwest Louisiana, because we're so focused on recovery efforts from the hurricane. And I'm a little concerned that hopefully we're not hit hard again by that, on top of everything else, especially with our medical facilities and things that have been so damaged by this storm. So
yeah,
got to take that into account.
It's hard to know exactly what's going to happen. You
can't worry. I guess you just can't worry about it every single day, but you can still be smart. You don't have to make foolish decisions.
Well, it's interesting, that you bring that up. That's kind of how we connected. How many ever months ago is we did a special for KPLC, Joel and I, Joel at Lake Area Counseling, and myself. And I had intended on doing a coffee talk with you. I think that's what you had called
I was doing work from home. So that was what I had been doing up until about the Friday before the hurricane was the last time I did that. So, we had talked about doing a little podcast, a talk. I was doing a little thing. So that all kind of started back during the pandemic. So that was ages ago.
and really, you came to mind because I know you have such a heart for this community. And it hit me whenever I was starting this, just man, who'd be great? Ben would be a great person to get on here, because I think people see you all the time on TV and Facebook and whatnot, and yeah, I mean, I know you're talking about the weather, but I wanted to do this just because I figured it'd be a great opportunity for you just to really share your heart and really give maybe some things to the community that they can use to really power through this and continue to move forward every day.
Sure, yeah.
You
Well, I
know,
appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, I've lived here now, almost 10 years. It'll be 10 years in April. So, I mean, yeah, it's home for me. I always get people asking me, now, where are you from? And I said, well, I'm from Mississippi, but I've lived in Lake Charles now for almost 10 years. So, it's home. So you get connected to the people here. I met friends and stuff that, like the place I'm living now, a friend of mine that I met after I moved here, he's actually from Mississippi as well. And we grew up about an hour away from each other and never knew each other until I moved to Lake Charles. So you realize it's a small world whenever you start making friends and connections, no matter where you go. But I just feel like the people in Southwest Louisiana have embraced me over the past 10 years, which has been great. I think that's one reason why I've been here as long as I have, because people asked me, like, why are you still in Lake Charles? Wouldn't you want to move on? Because typically in this television market that I work, it's considered a small market TV. And if you've ever watched KPLC, you probably have noticed people don't stay here a long time. They typically leave after 2 or 3 years and they move on to a bigger market. But for me, I think there have been a few reasons why I've stayed here this long. Obviously, the people here have just been great community to live in. Everybody I've met, has just been wonderful. My coworkers are a lot of the reason why, working with John Bridges, and over the years I worked with Brittany Glazer. You remember her?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we just developed kind of like what we call the dream team, and they're part of my family even today. The Brittany's cousins and uncles, and all of her folks. We still hang out, and of course Olivia was with us for a while, for like 3 times, and so she came back a couple more times, and we all were just kind of like family. So it's been, and now we're working with Rhonda Kitchens in the morning, and she's kind of a staple to this community. So it's been all the people that that I've worked with at KPLC have just been easy. It's made my job easy, just going to work and enjoying who I work with. It makes it like most days not like work. So for me, it's certainly been easy to call this place home over the past 10 years. And so when you see something like this happen, we know that we live in a hurricane prone area. Well, we live along the Gulf Coast, so we kind of expect at some point to have to deal with a hurricane. It's not like we live here with the idea that it's never a possibility. You just don't want to ever have to think about it, because we really had gone so long without a big storm in this part of Louisiana. We had Rita and Ike, and that was probably the last 2 storms. Then you had to go all the way back to like Hurricane Audrey, that was in 57. Right. So you went a long time between storms that this area, really had memories of. So I think for the area, it had changed a lot, since Hurricane Rita, with the population boom that we had here, with all the construction projects going on, especially with all the industry moving here, and we know what, 2013, 2014, all these people were moving here. And we saw a huge boom, but these people were not from this area and had never really been through a hurricane. So I think for a lot of folks, it did, this was the first big storm they had to go through, especially children. They probably heard stories from their parents about, going through Rita, or probably had heard stories from their grandparents about going through Audrey. But for them, this was like the first big event to have to deal with, as far as a hurricane, in their lifetime. So there were so many people that got to experience, something that hopefully we don't have to experience again in our lifetime. And that was 2, substantial hurricanes, within 6 weeks of each other. And that's when it really got mind-boggling with how that's even possible. I mean, those 2 storms made landfall within about 13 miles apart.
Right.
6 weeks apart. Now, Delta obviously was not as strong, but it was 2 different storms. You had the wind. I've heard it described as, with Laura, it was just a big, giant tornado that moved across the area, whereas with Delta, it was a giant flood. And that's kind of what it was. I mean, those 2, and that's why I would say hurricanes, there are no 2 that are alike. They all have their own individual components that make them all, unique. A hurricane is no two hurricanes are alike. That said, when you have to deal with something like that, it becomes hard to kind of explain. I've had people ask me, like, why is that happening? What's going on here? Because obviously, if you're keeping up with things now, we have another hurricane that's in the Caribbean that's lashing Nicaragua and Honduras right now, and it rapidly intensified. It's November. That shouldn't be happening. So it's hard to explain, really. A lot of times you get these patterns that set up where storms form in the same areas. Most often they stay out to sea, or they're in the open water, so they're not really paid as much attention to. But when you start getting them in a zone of development to where they all have to go into the Gulf, or they're going to affect somebody, they all becomes in the forefront, because anytime you get a storm in the Gulf, somebody's going to have to deal with it, whether it's New Orleans or Florida or Southwest Louisiana or Texas. It's got to go somewhere. So, it was just unfortunate for us. We had been fortunate over the years having to deal with minimal impacts from storms like Harvey that you saw devastate, Texas and the Houston area, dealt with flooding. And then we'd been on the cusp of, so many hurricanes and flooding events over the past few years that we were just fortunate. So I don't want to say, we were due up for something like this, but if you think about what all's been going on in years past with hurricanes in the Gulf, I won't say we're due up, but we certainly, it was just unfortunate, I guess you could say, for our area to have to deal with both those storms back to back. But when you're trying to explain that to someone, it can be tough, because so many people now may have this impression that this is the norm, or we're going to have to deal with this every year. It can make it tough, like if you want to consider rebuilding a house, or buying a house, or do you even want to, go to the expense of fixing this up if it's going to be happening like this, more often. I've even heard some news reports of people saying they don't even want to rebuild because they feel like this is just going to happen again in the next, however many years. They don't want to have to go through it again. And I can, you can kind of have to sympathize with these people, because, you think about what they're having to deal with now with the insurance companies and, just wanting to rebuild and having all these things get in the way. It can make it very easy just to say, I'll wash my hands of this. I'm moving somewhere else. But then you got to ask the question, where else do you move where there's not some sort of a disaster possible? And you could move to California. Well, look what they're dealing with, fires. You can move to, even Colorado. They've been dealing with fires. You can move to some place that's dealing with the earthquake or a tornado. You can see, devastation from pretty much any state you live in. We were actually trying to pick a place to move to that would be safest, in the country. We're thinking, where could we go that we wouldn't have to do anything? I couldn't think of too many places. I thought about maybe the Big Bend of Texas, maybe out West Texas somewhere. Yeah. But that's kind of a boring place. I don't know that you'd want to live there.
So there's pros and cons to any place that you'd want to go. You know?
Exactly.
And so I think that's a decision that people are struggling with. Just everyone's struggling with it. I've been here all of my life, and my family's been here probably since the 20s. I don't know. So I live on family property that's been in the family since the 30s or 40s or something like that.
So you could never imagine just up and leaving, right?
But it crossed my mind.
It crossed your mind.
Oh, it did.
Of course it did. Right. You're right.
It did.
I think you just have to come to the understanding that, you take a risk anywhere you live, there's going to be some kind of risk involved in it. And if this is an area that you really like to live and love to live, you'll call it home no matter what.
Right.
And you just have to decide, you have to make up your mind, and you have to know that you live in an area that, yes, we could have another hurricane next year. It's not out of the question. We live along the Gulf Coast, but I think we take those chances any year. There's always a chance that we could be impacted by a hurricane, but you have to kind of, come to the realization that, this is home, and, you have to just move on. At some point you have to make the decision to keep going. You can't just give up.
And it's a daily decision.
Right.
You have to choose that every day.
Exactly.
At least I have anyway.
Right. It definitely is a daily decision. Yep. So that's about all I can say about that. But I think the people of Southwest Louisiana have got to be some of the strongest people we dealt with. I was kind of joking after Hurricane Zeta made landfall in New Orleans, and they were without power for 3 or 4 days. This past week, and people were complaining about the power being out. And I said, well, first off, it was like 50 degrees at night. Every night the power was out. You had highs in the 60s and 70s. I don't want to hear it. Your power's back on. You deal with what the folks here dealt with, and I can say that because I had evacuated to Baton Rouge.
Right.
So for me, it was a little bit different. But there were people that stayed here for weeks, in the heat. We saw those stories about people that were trying to, fix their roofs and things, and they succumbed to the heat, after Laura made the landfall, because it was so incredibly hot here for so many days, and people had no power, no electricity, and they had no air conditioning, and it's just had to be some of the toughest conditions I could imagine living in.
Absolutely.
So if you made it through that, I mean, the rest must be a piece of cake, if you think about it.
Yeah, no doubt. Didn't I can't remember on the top of my head. Somebody stayed at the station for Laura, right?
Not at our station. So everybody left the building at some point. Right. Yeah, we stayed. I think our general manager was the last person to leave, and he said he didn't want to have to leave the building. But the reason why we left was because there was a potential that we could see about 6 feet of water get in the building. So it was a decision that we made. Kind of people, I've had people ask me, like, why did y'all abandon us? Well, it wasn't that we really abandoned Southwest Louisiana. It was that if we knew we stayed there, we would be off the air, so we would really be serving no service to the public. At that point, we knew if we could get to WAFB or somewhere that was not going to be affected in Baton Rouge, we could keep our signal going on air without the need for that building to be used. And that's what we basically did for weeks. We took that signal directly from Baton Rouge, and our actual broadcast tower is in Fenton. So we were actually relaying that directly to on air without even having to go through our buildings. Our building was inoperable for quite a while after the tower fell and took out a lot of our so one of the reasons why it took us so long to get back in that building is because when the tower fell, it fell into our studio, but it basically severed every network cable that goes to every piece of equipment in that building. So you can imagine hundreds of network cables that had to be rerun, everything from microphones to cameras to computers. Everything is now digital anyway. So when you sever all those links to everything, it was almost like the engineers had to rebuild the station from nothing. I mean, they had to just start over. And so it was a feat that I can't imagine taking on, and how quickly they got us back. It was just, incredible, and if you go in there now, you would see, what's been done to make us on air, to even get back on the air. It's just been a miracle in itself that they were able to just get things back on like they are. And if you've watched our news, you notice it's not the same. We're in different parts of the building.
Right, yeah.
Our studio is completely inoperable where we were the day before the landfall because of the tower fell into the broadcast portion of our building. So it would have been a scary night to stay. I mean, that would have been something. I was glad we made the right decision to leave. Thankfully, our news director and our general manager all made that right call to get us out, quickly, safely. We stayed as long as we could, but then we were able to continue to broadcast even the morning, throughout the landfall and the morning after. And that was what I think for me was the toughest, was being on air that morning after the landfall. And then you get those first pictures of what's going on, and you just start seeing, what Lake Charles looked like. And that, at one point, I remember completely just breaking down in the bathroom, of the television station we were in, because it was just hard to process all of that, and then when you see pictures of your house destroyed, and then
right, because you weren't even here.
I wasn't even here, so it affects all of us personally as well. And that's been what I think people don't really see, is that yes, we're broadcasters and our job is to tell the story, but we also live here. All of us. I could name off people on our team. Teresa Schmidt. She's having to deal with her home, all the windows blown out, and she's having, still can't live in her own house. I mean, there's people that either lost their house or they're not able to live in their house, or so we're having to also deal with the same things you're dealing with on a personal level, and try to keep our professional side up, going like everything is just normal. And so that's what's been tough for us, as broadcasters. And that's what I think kind of sets us apart from the national media that come here and they leave after a few days, and they tell a few stories and they leave. We're here for the long haul, and that's been tough for us because, for people like me and other people that, lost their homes, it's, it can be tough to even, decide if you want to stay here at this point, so especially for people that don't have insurance or they're having trouble. So that's been a challenge. A lot of our staff at KPLC is made up of younger people who this is their first job and they're away from home. And that's been tough for them, moving to an area like, for instance, one of our producers that does our morning show had just been here. His name is Patrick. He had just been here about less than 2 months, I want to say.
Man.
First job. He's from California. He had just graduated from Ole Miss and moved down here, and this was his first job. And all of a sudden, he's dealing with, a hurricane and going to places he's never been before. And so, I can only imagine if it was my first job and I was dealing with that, it would probably, redefine my, did I make the wrong decision to get in this business? Or it could be sort of the pinnacle of your career, getting to actually, say that you went through this and, look what all we did, during this to keep the public informed, because I felt like we were an invaluable tool to the public who was watching, even though a lot of our broadcast was just merely on Facebook Live for a while. People were still tuned in and getting that news, and that's what kind of made us feel like we needed to keep doing what we were doing. We didn't need to stop. It would have been easy. We were exhausted, and it would have been easy. And there were days to where I was thinking, can't we just take a day off? Is it really important for us to be on the air at 4:30 this morning? Who's watching? And we asked that question a lot of times over in Baton Rouge, but people were always tuned in. It didn't matter. And so that kind of made us feel like we were doing what we were supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I know we watched. That was something that really helped out, especially the day after, right? The morning of. And I had thought about that. I'm like, man, we're all experiencing it at the same time. We have no idea because it was so dark. And you just see the light coming up, and then you start seeing pictures of Ryan Street downtown, and you wonder, all right, my house is my house even still there? What's going on with it? And more often than not, I think people came home to something that was worse than they expected. And it's just so sad.
That's an understatement. Yeah, it is. But some people's homes fared well. I know I had some friends, where I'm living at here now, that were fortunate, and I even talked to a couple of my friends, and they were telling me that they had guilt, not survivor's guilt, but they had this guilt of feeling like, why was I spared whenever my neighbor down the street's home is gone? And there was that feeling upon them, that they didn't deserve to keep. They didn't feel like they deserved to have a livable house whenever so many people had lost so much. And that, I didn't even think about that, but I guess that could cross your mind, too. Why was I spared, But fortunately, some people were, because a lot of us had to find somewhere to live.
Right.
And you found a friend that had a house that you could move in, and you moved in with them, unless you're fortunate enough to have, a hotel to move to or somewhere like that. But I think if you had the option, most people would rather live in a house with somebody, even if it's not their own, than in a hotel. I know that's what I did when I went to Baton Rouge. Because the KPLC actually put up most of the employees in hotels, and they lived there for almost a month in a hotel room. But I had a couple of friends who used to live in Lake Charles that had just had a baby about 3 months ago, and they let me move right on in with them in the middle of a pandemic. So that was
that's amazing.
I'll never forget that experience, and nor would I ever be able to thank them enough for that, because it certainly did make my life a lot easier working there, and that was a blessing, just to have them open up their doors, as did WAFB, because if you think about it, we're all kind of working in strange times now. If you think about with the pandemic, and we don't let people just walk in our TV station, unless they have a mask on, or we take their temperature and things like that. And then for them to just let us all just come into their TV station, hello, we're all moving in, this thing's about to make landfall, and they're just like, come on in, whatever you need. And so that in itself is it just just shows that our company's a family. We kind of support each other in these type of situations, but especially this year, it made it even more challenging because yes, there was a pandemic going on, even though we had this Category 4 hurricane about to make landfall in Southwest Louisiana. So any other year, it probably would have been a lot easier, not having to do with both those things at the same time. So
yeah, it definitely is kind of shows the good side of people there, you know.
Oh yeah.
And you know, Southwest Louisiana, I guess, sometimes gets a hard time from people or from people of, oh, there's not enough culture, this or that. You know, I hear that every now and then, but the people here, man, they just, you know, when it comes down to it, you know, I've never been anywhere else, so it's hard for me to say.
Right.
But I think it really is different.
It is. And then after the storm, you know, we saw so many people pour into us. And that's what, for me, was, you know, I've always been the person that felt like I need to help somebody else. So it was always hard for me to be able to accept help. You know, I've always felt like that I didn't deserve it, or I just need to help somebody else all the time. But then when people are pouring into us, you know, just, you know, drive through, pick up food. If you're hungry, there's always somebody feeding folks or handing out supplies. You know, like my church, I go to Trinity Baptist, and they had, for the most part, just set up shop there every day. You could go by twice a day and get a meal if you needed to eat. But that was all over the place. I mean, you could find people that were handing out supplies and food. Even today, I mean, you know, there's still folks that are helping people out, you know, and that's just what, for me, accepting that was tough because I've never felt like I deserved, you know, help, you know. So I was kind of like, for me, it was hard to accept that, you know, just let these people help us. That's what they're wanting to do. And I think for Southwest Louisiana, we're giving people anyway. And so to see, I think the way people outpour to us, that's just going to make us more ready to help somebody else the next time there's a disaster, because we're going to know how they helped us, you know, and that we're going to pay it forward.
I mean, there's been people from Orange area, you know, from Harvey, that they came over here and helped.
Right.
And just, hey, you guys helped us out,
they
so we're here to help
did.
you. And that's huge.
And you don't forget stuff like that.
Oh, no,
you know?
you don't.
So that's going to, you know, make it even for us, make us stronger, but it's also going to make us, you know, just ready to help somebody else out in the next time there is a disaster. And I think that's what you have to, you know, you remember those good things about the disaster. And there are so many good stories that came out of this. I mean, I don't want to say it definitely wasn't a good thing that we dealt with, but there were so many good things and helpers that we saw after this. And you know that people were there and they're supporting us, and people were following us all over the world. I mean, because at the time this happened, it was the big story. It was the big news story because we had COVID, and that was obviously in the news. But this was really the disaster of the world at the time when this was happening, because people were following this story. We had people that were contacting us from the BBC and wanting to do interviews when we were at WAFB in Baton Rouge on the radio. They were following this story. I mean, and they were really interested in what was going on in this area. So it just goes to show that even though we're in Lake Charles and we feel like we're forgotten, you know, with this age of technology, like you were talking about earlier, the difference between Rita in 2005 and this storm was that this technology age that we're in now, you know, it doesn't limit this disaster to, you know, the reach of the people in the area. It gets out. I mean, with Facebook, with people on their phones, they're reading about Southwest Louisiana. There's people helping us all over the place. I mean, it's just amazing the amount of outpouring we saw and interest in this area. So if nothing else, it certainly put us on the map. It might have tried to take us off the map, but for our area, it certainly put us on the map in the world's eyes, and especially in the country. There's a lot of people that know about Lake Charles and Southwest Louisiana now that probably otherwise wouldn't, you know?
Yeah. I know I had ordered something. I had to call customer service. It was in New York. And I talked to him on the phone. It was a Friday. And you know, I was like, oh yeah, where are you from? Lake Charles. Oh yeah, with Hurricane Laura.
They feel so sorry for you, right?
Yeah, and it changes their attitude completely. I'm like, oh, okay,
we're okay. You know?
Yeah, we're all good now.
we're always say we're okay. We might not be okay, but yeah, that's just what we say.
And I was just, please don't ship the package FedEx. That's all I ask you.
I think I saw a FedEx truck go by today. I said, well, I wonder if they're delivering again. I don't know. But that's been another story. You know, that goes back to those challenges of things that people take for granted when it comes to, you know, just getting a simple package shipped to your house,
Yeah.
that's an issue. The post office, just trying to get, your mail, you can go by the post office here and it looks like, just a line out the door,
Right.
and that's not normal.
No,
You
not
see
for
so
the
much
post
stuff that's
office.
not normal, after this storm. So that's what's been tough on people. I know the stress. I was talking to my co-anchor John Bridges a couple mornings ago about how this had to have put so much more stress on people, physically, mentally. I'm sure there's been probably people that have had, I wouldn't say, like specific health problems from this, but I'm sure it's aggravated issues for people that might have already had some sort of underlying condition. Just the stress involved in all these hurricanes back to back. We think about, just for a healthy person having to deal with this, how stressful it's been. Somebody that didn't have any health issues, you compound that with somebody that might have already had, some major issue that was underlying issue. It had to have probably been even more stressful, and just can't imagine it. Especially if you're having to deal with things like insurance companies and your house being destroyed. That can be very, very tough to try to process. With everything else.
Yeah,
And you as a counselor, you might have,
Man,
I know you can't talk because everything is confidential with people you talk to, but I'm sure you've heard stories,
just to keep it general, there is not a single person on my caseload that's not been affected in some major way, like a major way. And if it's not, something that they're dealing with for somebody else, so the people that were spared, that guilt is there of, man, I'm really struggling because I just drive and I see my city destroyed. There's not, you can't really do a whole lot. You can't go anywhere without just feeling this overwhelming feeling. And, and so then you have the people who've lost everything, and some, there's a couple of those, of my clients that have lost their whole house, that live kind of more towards south and towards Grand Lake, but and they're doing okay. I mean, not perfect, but they're just keeping their faith and really trusting in God for this particular one I'm thinking about. But I think that it's the spectrum is just huge, and the people that you think are would do okay aren't, and the ones who you maybe you think, oh, well, they're obviously they're not going to be doing okay. They may be. I don't know. It's just all over the place.
And that, if you think about this area, I mean, this is a community of faith,
Right.
So if I think about two things that are going to get us through this, is that number one, this area being, coming together, and number one, from the aspect of, well, we're all having to, if you think about it, we're all having to deal with this. It's not like, you talked about a few people that were spared, but they're still affected in some sense. They have to live here and they have to see it every day, even if your house is livable. And so it's affected all of us, some more than others, unfortunately. But that, I think, is going to get us through this, because we know that it's not just me that's dealing with this. Everybody's dealing with this. So if you think about it from that sense, you're not alone. It's not like you're living on an island. You may feel like it because you feel like you're having to deal with issues like with your insurance company, things like that. You feel like nobody else having to deal with. Well, yeah, they are. Everybody's having to deal with it in some sense. So that's going to get us through it, because we all know that we're going to pull through as a community, and so that's going to get us through. But then the fact that this is a community of faith, being an area so tight knit, it's hard to know somebody that doesn't go to church that lives in Lake Charles, So that can be a very good source of strength, to get people through this, because it's going to take that, it's going to take all of that to get us through this, not just, banking on the insurance company or banking on something that, is probably going to let you down, I mean, more times than not. So that's what it's going to take to get us through it. And we'll get through it. I mean, we've been through some tough stuff, and, just the degree of what we've had to deal with these storms is just going to take so long. And that's what's going to be the hardest part of this. But I mean, maybe this pandemic is making us stronger as well. Think about how long we've been dealing with coronavirus and still don't have any answers on when we're going to get a vaccine and when this is going to be getting back to normal. So we have to kind of, I think that might have already kind of toughened us up a bit, having to deal with just the unknowns of that. And now this. And so if anything, maybe it's made us more patient. I don't know. You would think it would have to have made us a little more patient.
It's either you be patient or you just get completely worn out.
Right. So that's, and now we're having to be very patient whenever you try to go anywhere because the lines. I was using examples. I said, this is almost like a news story in itself, just life after the storm. For instance, I was trying to get a prescription filled at a local pharmacy here, and they had the drive-through was closed. I guess their drive-through was damaged, and they were wanting everybody to come inside. And I think really, in this age of coronavirus, you want me to come inside and get in line? And it was taking like an hour just to get, pick up a prescription because they were so slammed with people. And, then after that, I was like, I'm going to go through and pick up some food. Well, you drive by Popeyes or Raising Cane's or anywhere, and you've got a line stretched down around the corner, and it can be frustrating whenever you're just like, I just want to go and grab something to eat. You've got to budget a lot more time just to get the simple things that so many people take for granted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Eat a lot of ham sandwiches. What I do. Hey, they're not bad.
No. It gets you through for sure.
That's right.
I mean, anything that you could think of to offer, advice, support, like just from a perspective of, hey, you see me on TV and this is this person, but I'm really struggling this way. And this is the stuff that got me through. Obviously, you talked about faith and support and whatnot, but anything that you can think of that you want to add to anybody listening, just to help them out.
Yeah, I mean, just don't feel like you have to suffer alone. I mean, you might feel like you don't have anybody you can reach out to or talk to. I know for me, a lot of times it's been therapeutic just to talk to people, friends, family who may not even live here. So many people are concerned about you if you live. If they live somewhere else, people are concerned about us. And so reach out to those people, talk to those people, find, like local support groups in your area. I know you guys even offer something for just specifically for, people that are dealing with, damage from these hurricanes, right? And you have to just reach out and people they'll help. You can't just, like I said, suffer in silence because that's the toughest part is just not having someone who you feel like you can reach out to for support. And I know for me, that's been very, very helpful. Now I've had plenty of friends that, have been there to help me and support me. So it's made it a lot easier. Right. And that's not been the case for a lot of people, but there's always some resource out there that can help. And, you just have to seek it out.
Yeah.
It's there if you look hard enough.
Right. And like you said, we're doing one on Mondays right now, a free support group for anybody that wants to come. Some people are a little iffy with COVID and we are trying to do social distancing and stuff. And it's not a huge group, but I think the support aspect is really what people need because you can't do this by yourself.
Right. And that's something I think you just have to make up your mind that, we're in a pandemic, but you can safely attend things and stay at a safe distance. And from the mental side, it's almost like more important, if it's gotten to that point, you really need to step out of your house and seek professional assistance here if it's really weighing on you that much.
Right.
So that's something you kind of have to just weigh the risks versus the benefits of that. And I'm just glad that people like you and other folks are offering that because it's it's something that a lot of people would take for granted or overlook, that there are so many people out there that are hurting and need someone to talk to. And so that's great to have that resource, but you just have to keep the faith is what I say. There's, I think it says that you'll never be given more than you can handle, but this was pretty rough. This was pretty tough to think about having to deal with this, especially I think for a lot of people, again, I think that's what's the toughest part is knowing. And I know for me, I just can't focus on that aspect of like, what if this ever happened again? Would I be able to handle it again? And so many people probably would say no, like if this happened again next year, well, I mean, like for instance, your office, it's going to take almost a year to get it back open again. So,
well, I mean, that building, I'm going to have to find something else.
Right.
Because they're not even, they're not even going to keep my lease.
Right. So for that to happen, you can't deal with that every single year. And so, you have to look at it realistically, like, statistically, if you look at areas that are affected by major hurricanes, you don't get that every year. Thank goodness. I mean, it's not to say there's not that chance it couldn't happen again, but there's a chance that a lot of things could happen within a year that thankfully aren't, most likely won't, outside of even a hurricane. So,
Yeah, and the
but it can be
chances of it
hard.
being as bad as it was, again, I think, isn't it the fifth largest in
It's in the
Louisiana
top.
history?
Oh, yes, yes. Well, it's the strongest storm in over 150 years
For
for
Louisiana, but
Louisiana.
fifth largest in the
That
country.
sounds close. Yeah,
Yeah,
as far as most powerful storms. Yeah. So that's, that in itself kind of speaks of the fact that it doesn't happen often.
right.
We just unfortunately had to deal with it. So we're tough folks, is all I can say, and
Yeah.
we've been through something that most people won't have to deal with.
Well,
And
and I think, I don't mean for this to be a blanket statement by any means, but through tough times is whenever you can really start to work on that faith and connect closer to God. It's not. I was talking to somebody about this a couple of days ago, and you can't really be on the mountaintop all the time. It's whenever you go through the valley is whenever you get have that defining moments, right? And the ability to push through and connect and do it together, so
right.
we're in that right now.
Definitely.
We've been in that. We're going to be in it for a little while.
That's right.
And I think that this is pushing a lot of people to really do a lot of self-analysis and say, hey, I need to work on this inside of myself, especially right now. I mean, it's 2.5 months out of Laura, and
well, we're already kind of doing that anyway with the pandemic. I suppose people had kind of isolated themselves and slowed down and done a lot of self-reflection, but even more so now. I think it's even just made it even more amplified. So, yeah, I mean, you have to be able to put that faith aspect in your life, and that's really, like I said, unless you have that, I don't know how you would make it through it. I think that it would definitely take something supernatural, to get you through this, because you can't do it alone. And that's all I can really say that's helped me the most, outside of just having friends and support from others. It's taken all of that combined. And so you have to seek that out, and when you do, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, for sure.
When you can just say, somebody else out there, has got this under control, and so we'll get through it. And the good thing about it was, if you look back, as bad as this storm was, just the lack of the loss of life. I mean, we can rebuild. I mean, we can rebuild these structures and homes and businesses, but to say that you can come back and you still have those loved ones in your family that were safe from this because, they were spared, they evacuated, or I was shocked that how many people stayed for the storm and just made it out. I mean, that had to have been the scariest thing ever, to go through. I mean, even in these homes that didn't get damaged, I would not have wanted to stay anywhere in the path of this. As scary as it was just staying for Delta, and that was about half the intensity. We stayed for Delta, in the TV station, and I was thinking as it was making landfall, there's no way I would have wanted to have stayed here for Laura. I mean, it was scary enough as a 2. That had to have been one heck of a night, and that was coming through in the overnight, whereas, Delta, you could still see most of their landfall was, during the day and then into the evening.
Right.
So that made it a little less scary when you have a landfall during the day versus at night.
Yeah.
And
our next door neighbors actually stayed. So we left and they stayed. They're older and they talking to them, they were convinced that they were going to die.
Yeah.
And half their roof came off too. So they were in their house just praying and I remember talking to the lady and she said, yeah, I knew I was going to go meet Jesus, and it was just a scary experience for all of them in the house, just pacing back and forth, not knowing what to do and really just spending some time in prayer. Yeah. Where do you go in the house? I mean, you see the water coming down and half the roof is coming off.
Yeah.
And then the windows are busting on the back porch. It's like, oh man,
And then seeing my house, like with the entire roof gone, I couldn't have imagined being inside that when it happened.
Yeah. Your entire roof was gone.
Yeah. And it was, it was like a tornado basically just moved over the house and took everything off. It was so interesting to see like things that it left behind. Like it left like the Cheerios on top of the refrigerator. But then again, it took a piece of plywood off the attic and shoved it through the front of the hardy board siding through the into the living room, and it took 2x4s and split them and shoved them in the ground in the backyard. And so it was just that was some powerful wind moving through, And I had neighbors on my street. I used to live where I used to live. My house was over on the Brentwood off Louisiana Avenue, is where my house was located, where I was living. And there were some people in that area was hard hit. I mean, that was a hard hit part of Lake Charles. And there was people on my street that stayed in their house, and they were describing, like how loud it was. They could hear bricks hitting their house and I was like, I don't know how you did it. I couldn't have stayed through this, but nor would I advise anyone to have done that. We tried to get people out. I think we did a pretty good job. So
I really do think. I mean, and it wasn't just you. Obviously, it was Wade and the other guys.
Yeah, we all worked as a team to relay that.
You were just danger. Really blunt. And you're like, get out now. I remember, and I'm like, I really do think that you people took you seriously, and they got out.
Yeah, and obviously I wasn't here for Rita, so I would not have made those kind of statements, obviously just to scare people or get them in a, worked up or hyped up. I've never been one to really like hype or especially with tropical systems, because obviously we've been fatigued to the point to where I'm to the point now where, like, unless there's a direct threat to our area, we've gotten to the point now where, like, do we even care if there's something out, in the open water of the Atlantic? Because, I mean, we've had such a busy year. I mean, this is now the 29th storm of the hurricane season, the one that's Eta. We're in the Greek alphabet. We've gotten so far down the list. So, yeah, I mean, you don't want to overhype storms. Every time there's a storm, you don't want to overhype it, especially in an area like what we've had to deal with. It's such a sensitive topic now. So you have to, but even before Laura, I mean, with what we've had to deal with Rita and things like that, I'm not obviously going to get on the television and start saying things like that, just because I know how people take that. It's a very powerful word. That your words are powerful when you're on the air saying things like that. And that was my goal and intention, was because when we saw this thing coming in possibly as a 5, it was hard to really know what was going to happen, to our area. Otherwise, it was not going to, other than it wasn't going to be good. Right. We knew it wasn't going to be good. And the hardest part for me was just not being able to control it, and knowing that there's nothing you can do to stop it other than we've got now a few hours left to get people out of here, knowing that that's really, it was just a last ditch effort really to just hone in on the importance of getting out while you still have time. And I got so many emails from people after the storm telling me that, oh, my parents were going to stay up until that afternoon. They saw you begging people to leave, and then they decided to get out. So I know the message got out, for people that would not have otherwise evacuated, and they decided to get out, because really you had up until about 7 o'clock that night before it made landfall to get out. I mean, it was an easy exit, a lot easier than Delta. I think it's because less people were. With Delta, I think more people were evacuating from Lafayette and those areas to the east, and so it created that clogged interstate. Whereas with Laura, you had a pretty small radius of where you needed to just get out, and you had an area that wasn't as highly populated as like Houston or somewhere like Baton Rouge, so it didn't really cause a huge backup for the evacuation. So that was a good thing for our area, and I think that helped people get out safely, and even the people that left at the last minute.
Man, yeah, I know it. I talked to one person, and they said they watched you. I think it was on Facebook, and that made their final decision to go. Yeah, and so I give you props on that. I think that did for sure save people. Don't know how many, but I know you saved some lives that day, just knowing the damage that happened.
Well, I mean, that's and that all the credit goes to everybody on my team, because I think we all made that call to get the word out as strongly as we could in the time that we had to do it. I tell you what, though, with Delta, that was an interesting storm, because you saw, I don't know if you were evacuating for that one and got stuck in the traffic, but that was a little bit scary. I know for me, I wasn't planning to evacuate, but we saw the clock was ticking, and then so many people were stuck on the interstate. It took them 8 hours to get to Houston, 6 hours to get to the state line. And even like my friend here that lives in the house, people turned around and came back. And that was kind of eye-opening for me to see. People were saying that this reminded them of trying to get out after Rita when Rita was coming. Yeah. And so you could see just how quickly it can become an issue to evacuate in some instances. So, you always want to, I always say if you're going to evacuate, you don't want to wait to the last minute, to get out, because you can see what can happen there. But
no, we took the back roads up north.
Yeah.
And it still was bad. I mean, everybody was just trying to get out. I have a really good friend of mine. They went to Houston, and it took them, I think he said 12 hours. Wife ready to have a baby any minute. Like seriously, like right at that point.
Wow.
And it came right after, not too long. So that was a scary experience for him, just being on the road. And like, is she going to have the baby in the car?
Right.
Like, there's no way for anyone
hospital.
to get here. Just the traffic being so bad. Yeah.
So many stories, that are going to be out of this. I mean, and I wish I could hear all of them. And that's been my thing. Like, there's so many people that have stories that they're going to be able to share after these storms. And it made us all stronger. But then, I'm curious. I would love to hear them all. There's just not enough hours in the day to hear everybody's story about what they had to deal with this storm. But at least they're alive to tell it. And that's what I say. And that's all that matters,
Exactly. Well, I appreciate you sharing your story, man.
Oh, well, thank you.
I think it's been really good. And that's really my heart with doing this podcast is to have people sharing their stories on here and hopefully that can resonate with other people and they really get something out of it. And just by you coming on and being real, I think it's going to be really helpful.
Well, I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, man. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
Awesome.